Creativity is just your ability as a human to come up with ideas and then put them into action.
You have this ability to make phenomenal pictures and to show people how amazing they are as people. That is the gift, and it's pretty special.
For a lot of us, we just aim too low with those intentions. We say, I want to travel, or I want to make X amount of money. And those things are usually pretty attainable to some point. And once we get there, what happens next?
One of the most liberating things as an artist is to remind yourself that you don't have to please everybody. Once you give yourself permission to not have to please everybody, then you can start creating without fear.
With basically anything, there's the art of it, and then there's the business side of it, the logistics of it, the structure of it.
Your excitement is like a compass, and it points you in a certain direction. And when you walk or run in that direction, life seems to just align itself.
Hello, creatives. Welcome back to the ARC Creative Podcast. If this is your first time here, then this podcast is all about digging into the minds of creatives, understanding their stories, digging into their creativity, and learning a bit more about what motivates and inspires them to create so that we can take action to create ourselves. If you've listened before, then welcome back. Our aim here is to inspire you to become better creatives, artists, and entrepreneurs by learning from the best in the arts and business. I'm Sachin Khona, a wedding and portrait photographer, event producer, and the host of this podcast. I'm based out in Vancouver, Canada, and I'm thanking you so much for tuning in and joining us. Each year, art comes to life in the form of an annual conference and workshop called The Experience. And if you've been to The Experience before, then my guest today, Brian Morrow, needs no introduction. He was a massive part of last year as our host. He presented in 2016, and he's back this year once again. In this episode, we cover a lot of ground. We talk about how Brian's goal at The Experience is that he wants to be a catalyst for creatives, and I'm so honored to have a mind like his to guide us through the experience, to help us become activated and help us express our individuality. In this conversation, we talk a lot about creativity, growth in business and life, systems and processes. We talk about the space where creativity comes from and what it means to Brian, and we talk about the mind and body and its link to creativity. Quote that Brian loves from one of the greatest creatives of all time, Leonardo da Vinci. Brian does so many things. He's created a rap record, he runs a venue, he does commercial work and shoots weddings. And after moving to LA in 2003, he released a movie called Hal, which is based on Hal Ashby. And in January, he was entered into Sundance. This is a conversation I'll definitely be returning to over time. Brian drops amazing knowledge with his comedy and wit. And there's a lot of big questions to think about and reflect on. And if you're attending the experience, I really encourage you to make space to think about some of this before you attend so that we can really get to the crux of these topics when you attend. As a heads up, this was recorded in May, but we wanted to save it for airing until we get closer to the conference. So without further ado, here we go with Brian Morrow. This episode is sponsored by The Experience. The Experience is a 3-day photography conference happening this October 2018 from the 23rd to the 25th in Vancouver, BC. 10 creatives are going to join us from all over the world, and we have a bonus 4th day of masterclasses on the 22nd of October, in which these 10 keynote speakers will be teaching you hands-on in intimate settings so that you can expand your photography business and career. The experience is for all photographers and creatives, from wedding, portrait, commercial, fashion, and fine art communities. The theme is the art and business of photography, and if you want to raise the bar for yourself, learn from the best of the best, be a part of a growing and supportive community, and take part in our Adventure Day, live karaoke evening, and party your socks off, then we want to see you there. Listeners to the show can save $100 on the ticket price using the code podcast at checkout. That's podcast at checkout. Just head to www.experience.thisisarc.co for more information. So my guest today is Brian Morrow. I met Brian through another conference called Field Trip out in Los Angeles. And I've been a fan of his work for quite a while through seeing his work with the Shark Pig, which is a wedding and cinematography and commercial videography company based out in Los Angeles that shoot a wide range of wedding films and commercial films for all kinds of artists and brands. But Brian does a lot more than just that, which you'll soon find out. He's my guest today, and I'm stoked to have him here on the podcast. He actually was speaking at the event, The Experience, in October 2016 in Vancouver, and did an amazing job that I had to invite him back as a presenter and as well as our host. And he just did an incredible job there too, Brian. Thank you for that. And stoked to have you on this podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. How are you?
Yeah, doing great. Thanks, brother. Yeah, so I guess I wanted to use this opportunity to connect with you to really just, go into a bit more of some of the projects they've been working on, small as well as large, and really just, I guess, dive straight into the movie that you've been making which is called Hal and has been doing very well, as I can see on the internet. Can you tell us a bit more about this movie and where you're at with it?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for jumping into the biggest thing first, which was quite a big deal for us, my teammates on that project, to finally have it finished. Hal is a feature-length documentary, which is about a person named Hal Ashby. He was a film director who was most prevalent in the 70s, but in the 70s and 80s. And he made a string of really great 70s American cinema like classics. He directed movies like Harold and Maude, The Last Detail, Being There, Shampoo, Coming Home. So anyway, I had been involved with the project for about 4 years, and our director had been on for a year before that. And we finally, in December, we found out that we'd been accepted into the Sundance Film Festival, and the film was very far away from being done. But we rushed through an intense month of long nights finishing the film and got it finished for Sundance, where it premiered. And then a short time after that, it was picked up for distribution by a really cool company called Oscilloscope. And so, so now it's off. It's off to the races.
Amazing. And so how does that whole process work? I mean, 4 years ago, you came up with this idea to create this movie. A year before it got into Sundance, got your director involved, I guess. And then it got into Sundance, which is huge. And then you had to wrap it up very quickly. I mean, obviously a whole bunch of things happened within that time, but could you give us a bit of an insight into the whole sort of process from kind of coming up with the idea and then seeing it in Sundance, which is huge?
Yeah, it was awesome. To be just totally upfront, I didn't come up with the idea. The director, who's a really brilliant, talented woman named Amy Scott, was working at my company, Shark Pig, as an editor on some cat treat commercials that we were making, I think is what we were doing back then. Anyway, it was also very, very pregnant at the time, like 9 months pregnant. And I heard sort of like a yelling, or she's sort of shouting in the back of the studio from the edit bay. And I went running back there thinking I was going to need to take her to the hospital, like she's going into labor or something like that. And I'm like, what's happening? Are you okay? Do we need to go to the hospital? She's like, what? Oh, no, I'm not going into labor. I just got the official word that my documentary that I've been trying to get permission to do, I got the official word from the estate that we can do it. The estate of Hal Ashby, because he passed away in the late 80s. So we had to get the official permission to do it. So that's what she was yelling about. And I just kind of casually asked her, oh, what is it? What have you been working on? What have you been developing? And she told me that she wanted to make, the definitive documentary about the life and work of Hal Ashby, who I knew about back then. And of course, didn't know anything as compared to what I know about him now after working on a biopic of his life for 4 years. But I just said, man, that's a really great idea for a film. I think that's going to be really successful for you. And she just kind of said, well, would Shark Pig be interested in being a part of that? And I said, yeah, but I don't exactly know in what way do you mean? Like, where's the project at? But that's where the whole thing started. And I don't want to bore your listeners to death. I don't want them to feel like it's 4 years, but I can sort of scoot through the big milestones of what that was. We didn't have funding, so we crowdfunded. We put together about $65,000 or $70,000 in crowdfunding to do production, and we paired that with a lot of favors and a lot of hard work, sweat equity, I guess you'd call it, to make it through basically all of the interviews. We shot basically everybody that we thought that we were going to have in the movie with that budget. And then we started a really long editing process. And what came along with the editing was a really deep archival process, which I was not very involved with. but was sort of like overseeing in a way of talking about like the quality of how the things get digitized and be put into the cut, aesthetically, even to say that maybe should we shoot video of these photos instead of having scans so that somebody's like hand could be on it so that it shows that we actually had the real photo, or like a newspaper article. Should we have the newspaper article in a space that's lit as opposed to just a flat scan of it, which they end up being a combination of those in the film, different versions of it. And then, much, much later in life, as we came to getting close to the finishing of the film, then we decided to shoot all the B-roll, and we shot there were like a couple other interviews that we shot later on in the project where people who either we couldn't get a hold of them in our earlier production period, or we also just realized that we had like heavily weighted one part of Hal's life and kind of been neglectful of this other part of the story, which became, it was uncovered for us as well in the process. And we realized like we need somebody else to talk about this. And so added a couple other interviews at the very end and just started, the lengthy process of trying to finish and make the final decisions at every part of the film. And
wow.
It was really fun. It was hard, but it was really good.
And so how does someone who is mostly, and correct me if I'm wrong, shooting commercial and wedding videography work have time to create a movie that gets into the Sundance Film Festival and signed up for more distribution? And how do you balance all of those things, and how did that all come about?
I don't know. I don't know if I could endorse saying that it can be done in a balanced way. But I don't know what to tell you. I kind of put a bunch of irons in the fire in a way with my career that I thought, well, that would be great to do that. And that would be great to do that. And there was definitely a very stressful period where my business partners and I were in the finishing stages of trying to construct a building in Los Angeles, which is where our studio is, and also simultaneously finish the film. And that was where it had actually gotten like the irons all got hot at the same time. And it was quite a lot to deal with. It was very stressful. Not something that I recommend. It was like a little too much.
So what have the takeaways been from that then going forward? Like how does one balance future projects, or what are some of the takeaways or lessons that you've learned from that experience?
Well, definitely one thing, it reaffirmed for me the idea of how effective a realistic deadline can be to get things done. Because, like we had worked on the film for 3 years of editing and kind of like, well, maybe if we tried this section over here instead, or maybe if you did that with this instead of this way, like very free, exploratory, creative of expression type stuff. But then once we found out that we were in Sundance, we probably did more to the film, or almost as much as we had done to the film in all those 3 years within a month of just bombastic work. It was a lot of work. And like I said, it's not like a pace that you would probably be able to keep up, but just knowing that you have to have something done in a true deadline kind of way is a really great motivator to help you focus and give clarity to what is really important to the project and what isn't. So that was, I sort of knew that and worked off of that principle anyway, but I'd never had it proven to me in such a dramatic way that that's the truth. In terms of like finding balance and stuff, I wish I was better at that. That's my honest answer. Because I don't think it was in balance. I think it was a really stressful, trying time in my life where I actually realized like, this is too much. This is too much stress. And I don't really want to experience that again. So I'm not totally sure. I wish I knew more about it, how to say, oh, well, one good way of making sure you keep things in balance is this. I guess I could maybe say, don't do these things.
Do you have like a series of questions maybe that you ask yourself? If somebody approached you tomorrow, or another example of your work colleague had another opportunity, what would kind of go through your mind as to whether or not you'd take on that next big project?
Well, I think it's just a matter of my business partner, Jonathan, and I talk about this kind of thing constantly, like near constantly. We're basically obsessed with the amorphous, ethereal, philosophical ways with which you can run a company and grow a company. We really like talking about it in a theoretical way. But anyway, I think it's a matter of, you can just say yes to putting more on your plate. Like you can just say, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. And like, you can do an astonishing amount of stuff. Like you can, no matter how busy you've gotten before, like there is actually another level of busy that you can achieve if you really want to be doing a lot of stuff. The difference of whether or not it's super stressful is, I think, whether or not you have systems in place to be able to scale up the amount of productivity. Because a system is something that if you work on it on the front side and you build that system, it's kind of like a big equation. If this, then this, if this, then this, we always do this. Well, those files should be in a folder called this, would be my guess. It's really kind of boring stuff, but it allows you to be able to add more things because you're not actually having to give your personal attention to each of the steps of those particular tasks if they can be plugged into a system and then executed by, either other people that you delegate to, or just that you yourself understand how to follow the kind of paint by numbers of a system. And that's not to say that it's paint by numbers like that it takes away from any of the artistic side of it. It's that certain things, like we were talking about with a podcast, there's the interview of the podcast, and then there's editing the podcast and doing the show notes and doing the intro and then posting it to iTunes and then trying to promote it. And I think that's with basically anything. There's the art of it, and then there's the business side of it, the kind of the logistics of it, or the structure of it. And those things have equal weight. Without a good interview, there's no reason to do the show notes and edit it and put it up and promote it. But you can have a great interview, and if nobody listens to it, I'm not sure really what the point of it is,
So if somebody is running their own photography or videography company and has never, ever thought about writing down systems in place or thinking about the logistics of how their company runs and how it works, what would be a good starting point for them to get started on that and then to kind of expand as well, or to see opportunities in which they could grow?
Sure. Well, I would say one of the dumbest ones is using naming conventions. I don't know if people are doing this, but after having like my wedding company, we are 8 years old this year. And I was just going through a really arduous, super boring process of creating a correct archive of all the footage. The footage has grown between both companies, the wedding video company and the commercial, like advertising company. There's like around 160 terabytes of information now that I'm responsible for taking care of in a real way. And now things work correctly. There's a process for which you would create essentially like a job has a number which is derived from the date that you started shooting it. And then all the different, like the paperwork, as well as the digital, like where the files are kept, as well as how you label like the deliverables that you actually send to the client and everything, all kind of have like a predetermined set of names. And so if you don't have to look for something within that 160 terabytes of server space, you can know off the top of your head by understanding the naming convention, like, well, I assume that it would be in a folder called this because that would be what it would be named. And I found out, I mean, this is like the nerdiest, most boring, right? Like this is the least romantic, like least artistic thing to talk about. But like, it's a good example of what it is that is kind of like other things, because I was looking back into the old hard drives, which are now being compiled into a proper archive of things. And like, I don't know, just 2 days ago, I found a film file. It was a scan of some Super 8 film. It was called Weddings One. I'm like, oh yeah, that's an excellent name. Weddings One. Yeah, I totally know what's on that file from that name. Like I found a drive. It was called Pig. Oh, what was on Weddings One? Just probably one of the most important pieces of film that we've ever shot. It was my business partner, Jonathan, and his wife, Louise's wedding.
Wow.
So, like, yeah, it was extremely important, extremely sentimentally, personally important to make sure that you actually save and don't delete that or anything. And going back to those old drives, just looking at them and realizing how difficult it was to keep track of everything and keep it organized in a responsible way. Because, you know, when you're in the business of people's memories, essentially, they're trusting you not only to make them something to look at, but also you're the keeper of those memories. Yep. And it's really fine if it's like 1 or 2 weddings or something, but we do around 130 weddings a year now, and we're 8 years in. So you can imagine it could get very confusing if you don't have a way of keeping that organized. And I see firsthand from doing this archive process that the organization was not there before. And it made me remember how stressful it was to try to keep it all. Because essentially what I was doing was just trying to keep it all in my head. You know, like, oh, I know what that means. I know what that wedding is. I know where to find that. That should be on this drive or whatever it is. And there's no reason really to just keep that in your head. The thing is to create a system for how you store and organize your footage. And then you don't have to have it in your head because you only have to remember the system, you know, and that's it.
Definitely. Yeah, something that I believe all creatives want to get better at doing. You know, we want to focus on the creativity side of things and backing up and storage and filing and creating systems. We all want to expand, but some of this stuff is really essential if you want to continue to grow and be successful. And appreciate you sharing some of the insights into that. And
I know, like, I'm sure people didn't want to. People are like listening to this podcast, being like, "Oh my God, shut the up about naming conventions." But it's like, you know, the thing is, it's not just, I don't just mean literally naming conventions. I mean, everything that you can look at, which can say, do we do this over and over again? You know, essentially, like, I have a production company that goes and shoots advertisements, and we go out for all different types of commercials. You know, sometimes it's like a very, very small documentary crew that goes to the middle of nowhere, to a wool mill in Italy to shoot the traditional methods of creating wool for like a men's apparel company. And then other times you have like a 100-person crew on a big, huge stage. The clients are sitting with monitors on a couch. You know, the PAs are running around throwing away trash and bringing people water, and there's caterers there, and, you know, they're completely different things. But what's funny about the wedding business is it's essentially, when you look at it from a shoot perspective, it's essentially the same shoot every time. And I don't mean to take away from the individuality of what those people's celebration is about. I don't mean artistically, but I mean logistically, it's the same shoot every time. Why are you starting over at zero every time you go out to do the same shoot? You know, you can change what gear you use to shoot with, you know, every 6 months or something like that if you want to. But then just like we just started, so we pack the bags. And then the bags are just packed. And if you can just grab a backpack and go to a wedding, and everything will be in that backpack to shoot it. That's a system that we decide, well, that every backpack should have these camera bodies, these type of lenses, these audio recording devices, this amount of cards, you know, CF cards and SD cards. There's just a checklist of things. It makes it impersonal, but what it saves you from doing is having to go, oh, I got to pack my gear for that wedding. Why? Why are you packing and thinking about it every single time? Just pack it once and don't think about it for 6 months. The other thing is tweaking a system is a lot easier than starting from zero. Because, maybe you pack the bag and you realize at the first time you use it, oh man, this is a mess. I need an extra long lens in a different in a tripod. I need this. It can be adjusted. But then you would just adjust that and assume that then you're going to take that gear the next time, you know, and it doesn't take up any mental real estate in between. You just know that it's done, that it's packed and it's ready to go. That's like what I mean, is that that's similar to naming conventions, where it's like any amount of space you can free up in your brain, that you're not wasting the awesome power of the human mind on trivial bullshit. Like, what should we name this wedding? How should I name this folder of this wedding? Or what should I bring to shoot this thing? Then don't do it. Don't waste the amazing power of your brain on things that you could just make a decision and then act underneath that umbrella of that decision for potentially like years in a row. Or if you want, you can just think about it every week, and waste your time. You're just wasting your time though.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of photographers and videographers and creatives do that, every single time, just pack it again and waste like energy and stress. And so again, like super valuable advice. And
I don't look down the end of my nose at them. I only know that that's what's happening because I did that over and over again for years in a row and finally went like, this is nuts. Why don't we just like, why do I have to think about this over and over again?
Yeah. And so one of the phrases or statements that you said was the amazing power of the brain. I guess thoughts that come into my mind are around the presentation that you did at the experience and things that I know about yourself as well. But you're very interested in creativity and the mind and what it means to be a human that has this incredible brain. I guess, could you dive a bit more into that sentence for us?
I try to, and I'm not a Zen master who can always hold on to this ideal perspective, which is that it's essentially miraculous. It's a miracle to be alive and be a human, if you ask me. Now, look, I'm not impervious to occasionally being stuck in traffic and being like, move your car, idiot, which is not exactly the expression of the the miraculous expression of the divine or something like that. Or maybe if you're just like, watching like Storage Wars or something like that, you're not exactly like at the full expression of the cosmos. But I'm not up above watching Storage Wars or something. But I do try to hold on to the perspective that, I have seen almost, at one point in time, I had seen all of every Real Housewives spinoff. And so I'm not exactly proud of that fact, but it's true. But my perspective about it is, and it's not my perspective, is just what I've learned and read. It's just that it is a pretty miraculous thing to have a human physiology, and it's a pretty miraculous time to be alive. And to operate any business or artistic venture or entrepreneurial start off, or even kind of to go into any interpersonal relationship from that perspective is a pretty good place to start, I'd say. One of the first things is, if you can agree and sign up for that humans are incredible beings. You start off that way. You have to admit that about the other people that you're going to be working with, which is a great place to start, a level of respect for your fellow human. And what may be harder for some people to do is that you have to admit that about yourself. And then you kind of start going like, okay, well, what should we do with this then? And you're already starting at a better place and being like, I need to figure out how to pay my rent. Or, you know what I mean? Which is a small idea. It's like, I know. You do need to pay your rent. You do need to pay your bills. But that's not really like as fun as a baseline of being like, oh, are we a manifestation of the almighty power of the universe? I don't know. I don't know. It sounds sort of stupid, I guess, but
I agree with you. I think it's an incredible feeling, and to be human, especially to be a creative human that is able to go out, capture things on camera with videos or stills, and then to like show that to someone as something that you've seen with your own eyes and an expression of your creativity. And I guess what my question from that is that why you do so many things that are so different? Because there's just so many different ways in which you can express your humanness.
Yeah, I think those big buckets in my life, Shark Pig Weddings and Shark Pig and Office Party, which is the name of our building, which is like an event venue, which we also work out of. And then Hal, which is a movie that I produced. Those all, they're unique from each other in that they have different value for me. Just because like each one of them, in a way, I could also sort of talk about or something. They're like my children in that sometimes they're challenging, but they're also, I care very much about them and have invested a lot of time and loving attention into making them grow and live. So each one of those is different in a way, like at the surface level, but at the base level, they are the same, which is that they're tied together in the principles of creativity. Mm. And I don't think, I try to say this, I probably say this anytime I do a public presentation of anything, is I don't view, there's the term creatives flying around a lot right now. I think basically because of the change that's happening to the economy, where a freelance economy is emerging, as opposed to, the traditional thing that had been going on for last few generations, especially where it's kind of like you become a company man and they pay into your pension and you work for this company your whole life, and then you retire, you have enough money to buy a house and have a family and pay for your kids to go to school. That was the thing that we were kind of sold as we were kids. You might even call that the American dream or whatever. And then what's happening now, what's emerging as a new economic force, sort of to get revenge on the corporations that stripped away more and more benefits and more quality of life for their employees, is that now people are not willing to become employees of those companies. They work kind of like as mercenaries, which is to say, I'll do this for you. I will loan you my time and attention and my brain, but I'm not going to say that you can, tell me when to come in the morning and leave at night and stuff like that. And it's not a small economy. It's going to eventually tip over to be the majority, I think, within our lifetime. All that was my very long-winded way of saying that I don't think creatives are just fine artists. When I say creatives, I don't mean painters or musicians only. I mean that to become an entrepreneur and start your own business, you're going to have to be creative in a myriad of different ways in order to make that actually work, and not just in ways that are artistic. I mean, I think it's maybe an even tougher distinction for people whose business is that they are trying to create the business of a visual artist, like a photographer, because that part of it is obviously quite artistic and subjective, but that's not the limit of creativity at all. Creativity is just your ability as a human to make things happen or to come up with ideas and then put them into action. And that's the thing I really love the most about all those things. I mean, I wrote a rap record one time and I never even put it out. I never even published it. The only point for making the record was that I missed performing. Like when I was a kid, I used to be in theater and I was in an improv troupe and stuff like that. I used to do comedy, sports, and all this stuff. But I missed the feeling of walking out on stage and not necessarily knowing if people were going to like what you were going to do and having to kind of try to convince them through your energy, which is real do or die feeling. You can't say, oh, stop, let me start over. Let me just start that over. You got to either do it or not do it. And it's a wonderful feeling. So it's not really that I care that much about I didn't even really want anyone to listen to my record. I never even put it out, but I made a whole rap record just so that I could have that experience of being able to perform again. Because that is what I meant to say, or I think you were kind of asking, is that why you do so many different things? And the answer is yes, that underneath all those very different things, making a rap record, making a movie, creating a venue, a rental venue in Los Angeles, at the bottom of them, at the top, once they're kind of manifest, they become very different and unique from each other. But at the bottom, where they come from is from this space, in your head and in your heart, there's an urge to create things, to make things. And when I say make things, I don't mean it's not limited to a woodworker or something like that. It's entrepreneurs and philanthropy, and it's part of what is connected to, I think, wanting to find a partner and get married and have a family and stuff like that too. Not that everybody needs to do the traditional way of getting married before they have a family or anything. I just mean, that's got to be the ultimate creative pursuit.
For sure. So is it for the sake of creativity to express yourself, to create because you can create?
There's a guy that I met at a different creative conference called Camp, this guy named Maceo, and he had a slogan, I think that he even made in a t-shirt, that is just the single greatest act of freedom is to create. It really rocked my world. So I just thought, well, yeah, as on one hand, humans are animals, but there's this other thing that humans do that is pretty unique, at least the level at which we can create and share with each other. And what that does to the rest of the species is pretty intense, I think.
100%. And so with that in mind, you speak in front of creatives very often, as you mentioned at camp, and you're at ARC in 2016 as a presenter and came back as host last year, and we'll be coming back as host again in 2018, which we're very excited for. And what does it mean to you to speak to creatives and to get them in this forum?
I think, actually for me, it has very little to do with a message that I have that I want other creatives to hear and then follow or something like that. I don't pretend that I have it all figured out, or that my successes that I had in my business should be imitated in some way in order to have success in your business, or that I have expertise that could be gleaned from listening to my workflow or something like that. I do have expertise in terms of filmmaking. I mean, I've been doing it I'm old. I've been doing it for 20 years now. So, I know what I'm talking about, but that's not the kind of thing. And I'm happy to work I occasionally do workshops for videography and stuff like that. And it's fun as well to talk from a perspective of knowledge about something. But that's very rarely what I do in terms of being a presenter at the experience. And it's not my goal. My goal is to act as a catalyst for creatives, to get them, if I can, into a state of mind or an emotional state where they come to believe that they can create things and that they understand that it's an important responsibility that they have to follow through with that and actually do it, and to kind of start what I think is a inherent urge within all of us, but to kind of start that in motion to whatever extent I can, because people are totally different from each other. And so everyone has different hangups about why they may or may not be doing, what I think they should be doing. And what is kind of really their responsibility to do. Some people were told by their parents or by their peers that their idea is stupid or it would never really go anywhere. Or some people, by the same people, have, constructed a value system which is based sort of, like I said, small thinking, how do I pay the rent? And so they focus on that. Or some people know that if they did it, they would succeed, and they're scared to death of succeeding. And, it's just everybody has all these different blocks to just being activated and doing their real job, the job that God gave you. Is the job is to express your individuality, to express the things that you and only you really know how to express. And, there's just never ending reasons why you wouldn't do it. It's terrifying, it's terrifying. What if it doesn't work? It's terrifying. What if it does? It's both are actually scary. And I totally get that. And I think it's just that maybe some people need somebody else to tell them, just to encourage them or threaten them to get them going, I mean, because there's all different blocks, they need different things. And I do not pretend to know what all those things are, the solution to all those things. I only enjoy the process of trying to find out and trying to activate as many people as I possibly could.
Beautiful. And so what techniques do you have to activate yourself, though?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like you could go through it in departments, you know what I mean? Your mind is essentially endless. It's essentially infinite. There's no boundaries to thought. You can continue in any direction. You can go down a logical wormhole for as long as you want to, as long as your powers of concentration and focus allow, I suppose. There's some limitations, but your brain is also an organ. It's like, it's just flesh with electricity running through it. And it's housed inside of your skull, which is housed inside of the rest of your body. And like sometimes things that are just really stupid, like if you feel like shit in your body, it's not rocket science, or, it doesn't take Sigmund Freud and a whole bag of cocaine to figure out that you're probably going to have an effect on what's happening in your brain. So, you really, if you're thinking that you need to activate, like if you're trying to do something hard, like start an entire new business while you run your old business, for instance, which is something I think a lot of entrepreneurs have crossed that bridge. That's hard, man. Give yourself a little credit and appreciate that is a difficult thing. The type of thinking and energy that you're going to need to accomplish that is top shelf kind of energy. It's not Coors Light energy to keep your other business running and start a new one. It's like a nice scotch type of energy or whatever.
Where are you getting that energy from, and where can others kind of tap into themselves to find that energy? Because we're going to go through challenges and we'll have bursts of energy certain times, and then things just get really freaking hard. And how does one overcome that or find that energy again?
I think, like I said, sometimes I wish I knew more about that answer, because I have gotten to the point of being way too stressed out, and that stress can be very destructive. I don't think it should be glamorized. I don't think being like super busy should be a glamorous statement, or should be a sense of pride. And I don't think working yourself to death is a badge of honor either. I think that it's a matter of saying that you created the quality of life and you created the kind of life that you want for yourself. That's a mighty success. But if you want to do magnificent things, you sort of need to operate at a magnificent level. But what's funny about that is I don't think that it comes from actually pushing yourself to this other higher place. It's actually more about centering yourself. I think, at least it is for me. It's that when I'm operating at my lowest, it's when I'm too stressed out. And too stressed out is not a high functioning thing. It means that it's out of balance. The top has stopped spinning and fallen over and is into that side of stress. And that can be essentially anything. You can be too physically out of shape. You can get to a place where you are not just with stress, but with, like a deeper mental health concerns where you're out of balance in that way. You can get exhausted, in which case you are too far away from rest. Strangely enough, I have seen quite a few people get too rested, too comfortable. They're too far out of balance the other way, where they're just too, like when we finished Hal, we had a deadline and we had to work really hard during that period of time. And we got a lot done. That was how that project had to be done. If we had said, oh, it's just too hard, I don't know, we'll never make it. By then, we'd have to stay up really late at night, then we just wouldn't have done it. So it's not like, it's like an annoying term for it because it's so self-helpy. But I think when a human is balanced, humans are powerful in their inherent state. And we make ourselves less powerful by getting too far in one direction, too overloaded with work, too exhausted, too complacent, too stressed out. And it's just a matter of trying to get each of the kind of big departments, your mind, your physical life, your interpersonal relationships, and your career into good settled places. And then, I mean, I just think people can do a lot, people are revolutionary. People have done a lot historically. People change the world, individuals change the world.
So what would be, for anyone listening, like some takeaways that they could dive into after this podcast or right now, even just to kind of say, hey, I kind of want to look at some of these areas of my life and reduce stress to increase creativity. Do you have any kind of pieces of advice or resources that one could potentially look to in these areas?
Yeah, I think if it's just a matter of it's a matter of being, one, you have to have some willingness to do it. And you have to assume that you're going to have some willingness to change things as well, which is, it can be not just willingness, but you might need to have a bit of courage to change things. It's just a natural way, is that we get stuck in our habits, even if our habits are destructive. But within each of one of those things that I said, like going backwards, how do you get your business in balance? It's like the thing I said at the very beginning, just create systems. If you're talking about you want the business to be able to grow, do you have the infrastructure of the business in place for it to be able to grow? Or would growth destroy your business? Like everybody loves marketing, because it also stimulates like the pleasure centers of your brain to get a bunch of likes on Instagram. And so then everybody thinks, oh yeah, well, but this is also for my company. I'm marketing it, which is like, it's all true. But like, well, what happens if it actually grows? Do you have the resources and or systems set up to accommodate that growth? And is it going to grow in a way that are you steering it in a way that you actually want it to be? Those kind of decisions and that kind of work in terms of building, like, what I mean is the infrastructure for it is like, it's just the stuff that's not as fun for artists in general, but it's like, are you going to be paying your taxes correctly? Do you understand how many taxes you're going to owe at the end of the year? Do you have the ability to deliver the product to your clients at the same pace, even if you had 5 times as much business as you have now? If you have to delegate things, do you know the people that you would want to delegate them to? And if you were to be able to get so busy that you were going to hire somebody, do you know what you would ask them to do? Like, do you know which tasks should be delegated and which tasks should be held onto by the founder of the company? Like, these are the type of questions that just aren't as fun as the intoxicating feeling of trying to get like a really instant gratification of getting a bunch of likes on Instagram, or getting like a big write-up from a blog and then getting a bunch of new inquiries or something like that. And yeah, that's more fun, but that's what I mean by it being sort of out of balance. If you really want the business to grow, it has to grow both in, yes, it needs attention from marketing and inquiries, but then it also needs to have the structure for it to actually grow. And it's the same kind of thing that I mean in terms of like saying that when you're at your most powerful is when you're in a balanced place. And I mean those different things as the kind of departments, but essentially it's the same thing with your mind. The reason I brought up your physical state of being is it goes all the way back to Da Vinci, is the one who said an active mind cannot exist in an inactive body. And, I'm guilty of this. I don't work out enough right now, but like, if you are trying to do something magnificent, you're not going to be able to do magnificent things with mediocre energy. And so like, you might just consider, like, you can look on YouTube for the 7-minute workout. And if you're a child of the 80s like me, there's the one that has like the video game samples from like Street Fighter 2 and Mega Man and stuff like that, which is extra encouraging. But like, I get it. Like, nobody really has time to do jack shit. Like, nobody has extra time to work out, but you have 7 minutes, And if you're completely exhausted, I get it. Like, I get exhausted, but like, I won't go through each one and say, here's how you should get in balance. What I will say in general is it would be nice if we were all robots in a way. It would be nice if when you got to the levels of stress where you cross the threshold and you are actually doing like damage to your body. You are sowing the seeds of pathologies, which are eventually going to, come to fruition and kill you in a form of a disease or whatever. Like, wouldn't it be amazing if your body just went, oh no, you can't do that. Like, stop, you're too stressed out. But that's the thing. It doesn't. I mean, a human has more free will than that. You can go way past the point of exhaustion and keep working if you will it to do that. I mean, you can run your business as out of balance as you want, and you very well may be successful with it. Like, it's your willpower to go to a place where it's out of balance. It's just ironic because I think people think that willpower or that just hard work ethic or just sort of forcing things into place is the only strategy. And I actually think that it, in a way, is less productive. If you would consider stopping for a moment and saying, like, how do I center myself, or how do I center this part of this thing so that it actually works, is potentially more productive, actually. And I think it's a more powerful state of mind as a human. So yeah, that's my long rambly way of saying it.
No, it's great, Brian. I love listening to you and hearing what you have to say, because I find it very important that these are some questions that as creators we need to ask of ourselves regularly and to keep ourselves accountable to as well, to keep our minds and our bodies in a prime state so that we can be the creatives that we want to be and we can execute from that state of being. And the Leonardo da Vinci quote that you mentioned is definitely resonates with me. Could you repeat it one more time?
I believe the quote is, an active mind cannot exist in an inactive body.
In an inactive body, okay.
And look, I mean, I'm a video editor, you know what I mean? Like, I've definitely spent a great deal of time just sitting like slumped over in an office chair where all I'm moving is little twitchy things with my mouse hand. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. Like, it's easy to become inactive. I also don't think you have to be a Adonis to take great photos. You know what I mean? I'm not saying like you must be a bodybuilder in order to be able to have an active mind. I think that it's just that it's commonplace to go past the threshold of where it is healthy with all these things. It's commonplace to try to grow your business too quickly without taking the time to make sure that when you grow it, it works. It's commonplace to let your body get to the point where you are so inactive that it is going to have an effect on your mental state. It's commonplace for us to get so exhausted that you're drunk driving, basically, and all those things, despite the fact that they're common, I don't think that they're sacred or anything. I think that they should be questioned. They should be questioned, and we should be, especially if you're trying to do something that in the freelance world, there's no manual for a lot of this stuff. You just have to try to figure out how to do it. And it's kind of magnificent stuff that we're asking of ourselves. And if you really want to accomplish it, you're going to have to probably question the way that some of the things are of what you're doing, especially if it's not working,
100%. And I completely agree. I've definitely been working a lot on myself recently over the last few years to kind of help better improve my thoughts and my optimization of my mindset by meditating and reducing stress, and then trying to work out. I definitely have an inactive body, although weddings are quite the workout, but I'm working each week to train my body so that it can be in a better state again, to be more creative, so that I have longevity as well within this career, and so that I have the energy to do these podcasts and other interviews and run an event. And I highly urge the creatives out there listening to kind of sit and reflect on some of the things that Brian is saying, because it's very important for us to reflect on these things and then to take action as well, so that we can have healthier and more productive and creative lives.
Even it's a telltale sign of what a workaholic I am that I framed the conversation in only being like, oh, well, and you'll be able to do more work when you when you do this. But I mean, you could consider the fact that it's like, hey, you also might just need some extra energy, some extra patience, some space within the capacity of stress that you're going to take on to have a life outside of work as well, which is a huge I mean, is essentially the original conversation about balance, the so-called life-work balance, which for, again, that works great to frame it that way. If you're a company man and you go to the office and then you leave, your desk at the office and all those kind of what are antiquated ideas for entrepreneurs and business owners and freelancers now, because we don't have this framework of work that you can leave behind and then go to your life. It spills a lot more over into your life. And I would sort of say it's just not really a good way of framing it. But as well as saying, oh, you might be trying to start a new business or something, we should be considering as well that it's like, oh, do you also have the ability to, cultivate happiness and fulfillment with, the parts of your life that are not related to your career? It's like, should be at least considered. I just don't even think it's barely considered. It's not even talked about. It's like as an afterthought. Oh, and also your life. Oh, and also like, can you run this business and also be a good parent? And it's like, well, I mean, this should definitely be considered, because if the answer is no, like, which one is your real priority here? Like, those are also commonplace maladies. The effects of that particular one could be drastic. You're potentially like, failing another human during their developmental phase of like how they construct their worldview and indeed how their brain grows in their head. And like, so it's pretty high stakes. Really, it's really important stuff. It's your responsibility to do it. You created them. But funnily enough, just because of, I think, how much new stuff this is, I'm not sure that it's totally, even that is not necessarily being talked about. And I don't think that it should be that you should have to be like a freelance artist or a family man, That's bullshit. Because like, what is the point of playing the game if you can only, I just don't really get that. That's another piece of balance to consider is like, what's the whole broad strokes set of goals, like the quality of life that you want to have for yourself? What kind of life are you trying to create for yourself? And if that includes, you're connected to the idea of being a parent and raising a family, that has to be considered within the scope of like, and how do I run this business and do that? And how do I, or if you want to work 9 months of the year so that you can take summer breaks with your kids, that's impossible because you're the boss. You created the company. But like, how do you make it so that you can make enough money to provide for those kids in 9 months of the year? That's a bigger question, At least ask the question.
Definitely. And these are some of the questions that we want to be asking our audience, at the actual experience. Going to year 3 and the live event, our theme is the art and business of photography. And we've carefully selected and curated 10 amazing presenters that have a wealth of experience and have been in the game in the photography and creative industries from different disciplines for well over 5 to 8 years. Some of them even longer, and like yourself, Brian, for 20 years. And these are some of the things that we definitely want to discuss, because it's very easy to want to fall into a trap of creating amazing work and for sure putting that on Instagram and Facebook and chasing likes. But it's very important to maintain a healthy state of being, as you said, Brian, and keeping a healthy body and a healthy mind, and allowing one to, as you said, for sure, like create more work, but also to have balance in life and to fulfill the other desires or wants.
Yeah, really just to say that the life that we're trying to create for ourselves is a bigger conversation than just how much content we create. You know what I mean? Like, I feel very proud, for instance, of the work that we've done with Shark Pig, with the business that we've done, the opportunities that we've been able to have and provide for, like I said, my colleagues who are my friends. I'm proud of that. But if, I have a massive heart attack tomorrow and I'm on the hospital gurney and my girlfriend or my business partner run over to me and I'm trying to say like my last words, I'm not going to be like, we did it. We made commercials. Like, you know what I mean? Like, your life is it's a precious, wild thing. Like I said at the beginning, to be a human and to be alive. And you should at least be considering what you want to do with that life. I think it extends beyond how much work you want to do. But besides that, it's kind of like, I don't know, do people need permission or something to say that you could build it however you want? You know, I mean, because just in the same way of like, if you identify with wanting to be a parent, some people don't want to do that. They don't want to have kids. And I think that that's completely legit, and they should be allowed to create the kind of life and live the life that they want. But then once you kind of know, or if you are brave enough to really ask yourself, then there's a good chance that what you're living right now is not the life that you really want to be living. And that's where it takes, you know, a bunch of steps to start cultivating the kind of experiences that you want to have. But it's not impossible. It's not even improbable, I don't think, you know. I mean, depending, I guess, on what kind of goals you have. But there's a lot in the realm of possibilities. And yeah, I think as the host at the experience in the fall, I'll be trying to help people stay within the kind of energy state and mind state to be able to take in what the presenters are saying, you know, and apply that to their own life. I'm going to be trying to keep them in the frame of mind of thinking that they have the power to do great things and be great people if they're kind of willing.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that. Just while we're on the topic of coming back to the experience in 2018, can you share some of your kind of highlights maybe from previous years? You're our closing presenter in 2016, and you beautifully wrapped up all the presentations, which was incredible. You referenced every single one, and I absolutely adored that presentation. And but
it was fun, but it was sort of like a cheap trick in a way or something. But
really, I don't know. I was very impressed.
Oh, good. Well, good. It was a bit of a magic trick. You know, if I knew that I went through and referenced everybody else's thing, then I would at least get those people to listen to what I was saying. But it was fun. It was actually a bit torturous in a way, because I definitely had to listen with a more astute ear to all the presentations than I maybe would have in a different context. And I don't mean that I don't listen. I actually do go to all the presentations at any conference that I'm a part of or anything like that. I do listen to what everybody's saying. But out of respect, I do want to hear what they're saying. And also you want to make sure you don't do the same jokes as somebody else or something. But hosting is totally different. The next year it was just so fun because it's not as intense of a job to have to get across like one big major, the points that you have in one thrust of presentation, but to sort of just be along for the ride with everybody else. And so it's great fun. It was my great joy, and I'm honored to be invited back to do it again this year. I'm going to try to come up with a few, besides just like dirty jokes in between, a few sort of like simple exercises, like I said, to try to keep people like engaged and just entertained and everything too. I mean, entertainment and humor is a good way of keeping people in that energy state where you might be able to be a little more keenly introspective about what you're really trying to do with this life as well.
For sure.
Laughing is good for you.
Definitely. And you definitely had us in hysterics last year. And one of my favorite memories from 2017 is you randomly DJing at the after party. You definitely saved us there. We had one of our DJs was falling behind, and we had and our current DJ had to leave. So Brian thankfully stepped up with his iPhone and just hand out some tunes, which is great.
You know, I mean, I roll with these really great DJs, like world-class DJs. My business partner and office party, Michael Antonia, is the guy who started this company called The Flash Dance, which are like, you know, full-blown real DJs, like who could play clubs and whatever, that get booked out and sent to all kind of corporate events and weddings. And so, I'm around these guys who are like amazing all the time. But I never, as you can imagine, there's no way in hell I ever get a set, you know, in my normal world. So when you're like, hey, do you want to like would you, be willing to throw some music on? I'm like, yeah. And then the funniest thing is like, I'm up there trying to just like, I'm just on my phone. I don't even have any way of fading the tracks together or anything like that, but I'm trying to hit them and change them up in an intelligent way, or a way that's not too terrible to listen to, like fade it down and fade it right back up or whatever. And then so amazingly, like, I know I basically only have 20 minutes, and this is going to be the probably only 20-minute DJ set of my entire life. And kids start coming up and asking for requests. I'm like, yeah, like somebody comes up and is like, hey, could you play? I was like, wait a second. Like, and like change a track. And then I'm like, what? And I'm like, hey, can you play? And I'm like, are you asking me for a request right now? No way. No way. I'm going to play whatever the I want for the next 20 minutes. You can ask the professional DJ for a request, which, by the way, they don't like that. But,
yeah.
You know, I don't know. I guess it was kind of weird. I was playing like Take My Breath Away by Berlin.
Yeah. Well, you own that space, and yeah, again, thank you so much.
No, it was fun. Thank you. It was hilarious. I was having a blast.
You did. Well, Brian, thank you so much for all your time and for sharing all that you have. Just a few quick questions I had is, with the movie, how and your presence with the Shark Pig, where are some places that our audience can find you?
Hal is we'll have a theatrical distribution run starting in September. And so if you check in with me on social media, then I'll definitely always be annoying people about going to see that. It will be limited. It's not going to be like in a theater near you. It should be in at least 10 cities in the US. Also, depending on when this comes out, I'll be with the film in Seattle at the Film Festival on June 1st and June 3rd. If anybody from the Vancouver area feels like coming down and checking out the film, I'll be there representing for my team. And so I don't know. They all have their own websites and whatnot. I don't think it should be that hard to find me. I don't need to list all my handles.
Yeah, no worries. Fantastic, Brian. Thank you again so much for your time. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you in October.
Dude, thank you.
Brian Morrow. I'm not going to lie, I am a massive fan. And thank you again, Brian. In LA, Brian's movie just opened this week. You can follow along by using the hashtag Hal Ashby movie. And once again, Brian is going to be at the experience this October. And if you enjoyed this conversation, then you're really going to enjoy listening to Brian. And he's going to take us on an amazing journey of 3 days in Vancouver. Brian is doing 2 classes during the experience on our private masterclass day, which is on Monday the 22nd. One is called Videography and the other is Unexcused. They're both half-day workshops, but you can do the full day, which is 9 a.m. to 12 noon for the first class, and the second class is also 3 hours and between 1 and 4. So go to www.experience.thisisarc.co to check out more about the class, and we hope you can join us at the experience. Thank you again for tuning in. My name is Sachin Khona, and I wish you all the best on your creative journey, and looking forward to connecting with you again next week.